Hello teachers. In this video, I want to show you how to use Google's NotebookLM to make your jobs easier. So the first thing you have to do is come over to notebooklm.google.com, and you can use this for free as long as you have a Google account. And if you don't have a Google account, you can sign up for one of those for free. And if you're worried about using your personal account to access artificial intelligence, you can create a burner account to play around with this if you want. But I find that just my Google account is great. So let's go over how to use this. So the first thing that you're going to do when you get in here is you'll create a new notebook. So when you create a new notebook, it automatically prompts you to add sources. So the thing about Notebook LM is that you get to add whatever sources you want, and you can add Google Docs, Google Slides, you can upload PDFs. So you can upload and add all kinds of sources, which makes it really, really convenient. Let me show you an example of one that I did recently. So here is one that I did recently where I added a bunch of different sources. So you can see some of these are PDFs, some of these are websites, some of these are videos, and I added them all into this particular notebook folder. The way I did it was I had this discover button up here, and then this asks, what are you interested in? And I said, I want to know how teachers are using Notebook LM. And then I hit submit, and it gave me 10 sources. And then I said, I'm wondering how teachers are using generative artificial intelligence to facilitate their jobs, especially using Notebook LM. And then I got 10 more sources, and I added those in here. And then what you can do once you've added all of your sources in is you can start interacting with them. So there's a box here that you can type into to ask questions. So you could say something like, what are the most important considerations, let's spell this right, considerations for teachers using AI? And in a matter of seconds, this program will give you the results. And you can see right here, it took a matter of 6, 7 seconds. And then it has a whole list of these things. And the cool thing about this is that I know that you may be worried about artificial intelligence getting things wrong. And it does. But the thing about Notebook LM is that it shows you where it's getting its sources. So it'll tell you where it's pulling from. And you can go and double check in that particular source to verify that the information matches. So right off the bat, it's a very powerful tool. So let's talk about some specific ways to use it. Let's look at a case where you want to use it to create a study guide for a particular piece of content. So let's say I'm teaching a course about culturally responsive pedagogy, and I want to talk about liberatory pedagogy and the book Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks. But I have a resource that I want to use that's a video. So I can add in the video when I click add, and then it'll let me add in a YouTube video. So I can paste in my YouTube URL. So I just go to YouTube, find the video that I want, copy the link at the top, and then paste it in here. And then it adds it in. So I have added in a video that I created about bell hooks teaching to transgress. And so if I wanted to use this as the content, I can come over here and create a study guide by clicking study guide when I have this as my source. And it will create a study guide. It has quiz questions along with an answer key. It has essay questions. It even has a glossary of terms for vocabulary. So you can see that creating a study guide could save you a lot of time as a teacher. I'm sure that your wheels are already spinning with all of the ways that you can use this. And you can upload large files. You could upload entire books. So like, for example, if you went out to Project Gutenberg and then you got a copy of, Pride and Prejudice or something that's in the public domain, that's a PDF, you could put the entire PDF in here and then start interacting with the entire book, asking questions about it, creating a study guide about it. You could even upload individual chapters of a book, Okay. The other thing you can do is you can upload your notes. So if you were like teaching science or something and you had a bunch of notes about a topic and it wasn't necessarily in the textbook and you wanted your students to have access to that in addition to the textbook or whatever you're using, you can upload your notes in here and create a study guide using your notes as well. Okay, so study guides are just one way to use NotebookLM. The other thing that you want to do, though, to make sure that your study guide is accurate is you can, once you have your study guide, you can click this button that says Convert to Source. And when you click that, it will convert it to a source, like you can see right here, and it adds it right over here. And then you can ask a question in here by saying something like, are there any instances where the questions on the study guide can't be answered by the content in the source, right? So I did that, and it tells me, oh no, this study guide consistently reflects the content of the video, and it even breaks down how. So if I was concerned that I might be giving my students some questions that they couldn't actually answer based on the content, I have just verified that it does contain all of the information to answer all those questions, and that in fact, all of the vocabulary that they featured in the study guide is actually in the video as well. So you can kind of use this to double check itself, which I think is really, really cool. The other way that I want to show you how to use this is guiding questions. So let's take a look at this example. So in this example, I've added a source about the French Revolution and a source about the American Revolution, because a lot of social studies standards, depending on where you live, they ask students at some point in their educational career to compare the French Revolution and the American Revolution and how these things started and how they might be similar or different. And so I've uploaded the French Revolution from thoughtco.com, and I got an American Revolution source from the exact same place. So that way there's a little bit of consistency there. And then once you have them in, you can start to create study guides again, but you could also start to use this to create guiding questions. So you can say, so if I uploaded just the French Revolution, I could say create guiding questions to help my students focus on the most important parts of these articles. And then you probably don't have to spell it right, because I'm guessing that this thing is so smart that it understands what I mean, but I'll spell it right for your behalf there. I was an English teacher, but they never made me pass a spelling test to get the job. Look how fast that was. I couldn't even finish my joke before it got completed here. So this has a section for questions about the French Revolution and a section for questions about the American Revolution. So when you're teaching, it's a good idea to have some sort of questions to go along with any text that you give your students so that they can record their thinking as they go along. And if you don't want to have to read the articles closely yourself and go through every little bit of thinking about what do my students need to know, you can use this. And then you can use these questions and look at the article and see, are these questions the ones that are going to be the best for my students? Do I need to make any adjustments? And so I think it's a lot faster to do it this way and then to go back and double check than it is to look at your assignment and then create everything from scratch. So create some guiding questions using the chatbot. The other thing that you can do here is you can create a timeline. So let's see. There's a timeline here for the French Revolution. I created this one when I had only uploaded the French Revolution before I uploaded the document about the American Revolution. So it creates a timeline there. And then when I had both of them, I ran it again, and you can see it separates them into different revolutions here and generates a timeline again. Think about how useful that might be in a social studies context. The other thing that you can do is you can create a study guide for both of these sources. So if you had both of these in a lesson plan and you needed questions to go with these, you can click the study guide button and it will create the same study guide that I showed you previously. Okay. Another thing that you can do is start to ask questions about, that's a comparative study guide when you have both of them. You can create a mind map. A mind map might be really helpful if you have a complicated topic and students need help seeing how it breaks down into categories or individual pieces. So in the case of like the French Revolution, it breaks it down into key changes, key people, key dates, causes, events, consequences. And you can see that if you click on this, it expands these areas for you to take a look at. And so you can explore mind mapping that way as well. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is the briefing docs. So let me go over here to my example for that one. In New Mexico, where I teach, a few years ago, the public education department came out with a comprehensive strategic plan for 2022, which is actually their plan for like 2022 and moving forward into the future. And so this is a document that would be important for teachers to read. However, it's a really dense document, and it may take longer for people to read than they want to spend reading it. And it's not very convenient to read this document either. So you might come in here and click something like briefing guide. If you click the briefing guide, this gives you a very comprehensive overview. This goes beyond just a summary. So it gives you the purpose of the document. It gives you an executive summary, but then it also starts to pull out main themes and important ideas. And you can see in this particular case, this had several of them. And it also has key facts and figures in here, and then quotes, so like important quotes that you might want to use, like if you were writing a paper or something, that in there as well. And then it has a conclusion at the end. So you can get a lot of information about a very dense document in a very short space and in a very short time by clicking the briefing doc. The FAQs are very similar to the briefing doc. In fact, if you were to generate a briefing doc and the FAQs, you would find that the information overlaps a lot. So what's the difference then, you might ask? A frequently asked question document is going to be a concise version of what you get in the briefing document. This is a lot more streamlined and easier to look at if the briefing document is going to be more than you need. So this breaks it down into and they're guessing at what the most frequently asked questions would be, obviously, but this is the AI's best guess at the things that would be the most confusing or the most questioned regarding this particular resource. So you can already see how much time this will save you if you just kind of glance through both of these documents, then you kind of have the entire gist of this larger document there. So it can be a way to help you read large documents quickly. It can also help you prepare for presentations. So if you have a presentation that you're going to deliver about something that's a big topic like this that has a large report, or maybe several different documents related to it, you can come in here and add them all and then add them to your briefing doc. And then that way you can start to take the briefing doc and turn that into your presentation as well. Okay. Let's talk about synthesizing sources. So the ones that I've showed you have been basically single texts or just two texts, so not a lot of texts in terms of the sources. But you can add up to 50, like I mentioned earlier. You can add up to 50 of these things. And then once you have all of these things in there, it will synthesize all of this information. So the synthesis is really where I think the value lies in NotebookLM, because you can generate concise information about a huge amount of information. So for example, I have added all of these sources. There's 20 sources about NotebookLM or artificial intelligence and how teachers are using it. And then you can use it to create a podcast that will synthesize all of these sources. Isn't that crazy? If you hit generate over here on the audio overview, it will create a podcast. I won't hit generate here, but if I go over to, for example, I have too many of these notebooks, AI and education, and I click to load the conversation, you'll be able to see this thing in real time. I'll show you what it's like. And then the coolest thing about the podcast isn't just that you can create a podcast, but you can interact with the podcast in real time. So if I go into interactive mode, it'll show you what this podcast is like. So I'm going to hit the play button so you can hear. This was a synthesis of like 17 different sources about artificial intelligence and education. And you can see the entire podcast on my YouTube channel. But all
right, so we're diving into something that's changing the classroom, artificial intelligence in education, and
definitely a hot topic.
Yeah, we're not talking robot teachers taking over
you can tell that right off the bat, the podcast sounds real. If you've never heard one of these Notebook LM podcasts before, they sound real. The problem is that they all sound the same, that you basically get the male and the female voices, and that is it. The voices never change. So as of right now, as the time that I'm filming this, they don't change. But the cool thing about the podcast, though, like I mentioned, is that you can interact. So check this out.
Yet, but about AI tools that are all.
Oh, wait, someone wants to join. Hey, go for it.
Hey, what do the sources say about accessibility and artificial intelligence, especially for historically marginalized communities?
Oh, that's a really important question.
Absolutely. It's something we should definitely unpack.
So one of the UNESCO documents we looked at specifically raises concerns about accessibility.
Yes.
So you see, if you interact with it, it will stop the podcast and then talk to you about the thing that you've asked it about, which is insane. Like, think about the learning that you can do there. Also, think about how accessible you can make texts now. Instead of just having students read a text, they can now listen to a podcast about multiple texts to get a broader overview of things. So you don't have to wait for somebody else to make the podcast for you. If you like to use podcasts as an educator, now you can come in here and generate a podcast yourself. That's it. That's my Notebook LM for educators. If you want to see where the mind map is, let's see. That's over here. Whatever you upload, you'll be able to add to your notes over here. You can create the audio overview, which is the podcast. You can generate a mind map. So if I want to generate a mind map for this, it takes just a matter of seconds. And then I can look at this and see, look, Notebook LM for educators. And then it breaks it down. So if I was going to write a paper, for example, you might upload everything and then see how it breaks it down for your sections. Just some thought. All right, that's it for me. I'll see you guys in the next video.